If I may have your attention, please. Good afternoon, all. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests today. I'm so glad you all are with us. We're a small but high-quality band. I like the percentage of students. I like that a lot. I think that's, given the topic jobs, as we were saying, that really works. So today's topic is a conversation with Evelyn Larrubia, who is the associate editor of the Los Angeles Daily Journal. I first met Evelyn a year or so ago when I'm on the Knight Fellowship Board at Stanford, and I was up at the meeting and got a chance to meet Evelyn, who was a Knight Fellow, had gone from LA up to Stanford and has returned to LA. And she has a really interesting project which she is not going to devote her remarks to, but which I hope we'll be able to discuss a little bit in the Q&A time. She wrote me after I got here saying, we have a bunch of jobs. And I thought, whoa, jobs, this is very good. So I was just asking, had he filled them? He filled them all with a variety of people, including one of our recent graduates. So I was delighted about that. So I'm delighted that you're going to talk to us about today's reporting job, what it looks like, how to land one, what to do when you get there. So that's all yours.
All right. So this is pretty informal. Feel free to interrupt with questions at any time, and feel free to come closer. I'm very nearsighted. I am, in fact, an editor at the LA Daily Journal. That is a trade publication, and our focus is on the legal trade. We have about 7 bureaus across the state, and we've got one in D.C. And we have a big office in San Francisco. And part of my job as associate editor is to recruit, and we had 6 job openings this summer, so I'm very tired. But I want to get a sense of, I feel like there's a lot of students in the room. How many of you are graduating this summer and are going to be looking for jobs soon? Yeah? Okay, about half of you. And how many of you, I'm just curious, how many of you have already had a paying job in journalism? Yeah? Okay, so tell me.
I worked for a couple magazines in the Southwest.
And what was your day-to-day? What did you do?
I covered random stories. I did a lot of like what to buy now. I did a fashion stuff. I did a lot of fashion stuff, but I did a lot of like health articles, and I kind of had to like find my own stories and that sort of thing. Contact a bunch of like specialists and doctors and that sort of thing, and find like the next big allergy or whatever.
Okay. And so, sorry, tell me your name.
I'm Tiffany.
Tiffany. And
I'm Amelia. I actually work for public affairs for Annenberg, so I read about these things.
okay. All right. Who else? Is there someone back there? Yeah. Tell me your name.
This is Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
This local reporting. A lot of it's like self-motivated freelance stuff, so kind of out there alone, pitching stuff.
In the wilderness?
Invoicing people, hoping they pay you.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
I hear that's not so much fun.
Freelance, yeah.
Anybody else? No? All right, so, there's a lot of talk about tweeting and blogging and HTML and Flash and, being able to do all of these things. And I think it's really smart that most journalism schools are teaching their students to do all of these things, because I think it opens a lot of doors for you. And I think there are a lot of jobs in startups and in nonprofits that will tell you they have a year of funding and you kind of hold your breath and jump in. And the expanding world of the web does have an expanding number of opportunities. That said, I will tell you that it's very, very likely that your entree into journalism, your first job, is going to be a lot like my first job, right? I've been in journalism for 20 years. It's been a print career. I've worked at 5 papers. My first job was, I was in college and I was a clerk for the St. Pete Times. And what that meant is that the press releases would be faxed over, faxes. And we would collect them and we would sort through them and we would, produce briefs and we would, write little 2-line obits. And on a really, really good day, we'd get a story obit. And on a really, really good day, we might get sent out with a photographer to do a man on street about something that was going on that day. So I think that what I'm saying is don't learn the photography, learn the video, learn Final Cut, learn all of those things. But don't overlook the possibility that your first job is going to be about stringing nouns and verbs together and doing a lot of groundwork, just like it was 20 years ago. the other thing that I wanted to point out is that, so when I graduated college, I had 2 job opportunities, and one of them was as a consumer reporter slash columnist, writing a column about, broken toasters and unmet promises for the Spanish edition of the Miami Herald, and the other one was a cop's job at a little paper in Central Florida. And those kinds of entry-level jobs still exist, and the smaller and mid-sized papers aren't hurting nearly as much as the bigger ones. And so when you look broadly and look at these things and know that even though, yes, the cutting edge might be doing multimedia and it might be doing all this really great creative stuff, you have to go where the jobs are first. And those papers aren't really going to care, I'm sorry, how many Twitter followers you have. They're going to want to know, can you ask questions? Can you gather information? Can you string together a story? Not a collection of information, but a story. And that's pretty much what they want, and they're going to want you to do it every day, and they're going to want you to do it fast. So what does the entry-level job look like? I think that personally it looks a lot like it did 20 years ago. I don't think that's changed. I think the path is a little more tenuous now, though, right? I mean, so where do you go from there? It used to be you'd start off at a small paper, and you'd go to slightly bigger and bigger papers, getting the experience. You'd start as a general assignment reporter or as a cops reporter, and then you'd move into more challenging beats. You'd cover City Hall, or you'd cover the county, maybe education, topical beats, transportation. You were kind of building your experience and your knowledge and your ability to tackle difficult subjects. It made a lot of sense, and there was an elegance to it. And I still think that's the way to go. What concerns me, though, is that with the layoffs that have gone on in the industry, a lot of the mid-career journalists have been pushed down into some of these jobs that younger reporters used to do, and they're staying put. And so I don't know what the second, third, fourth steps might be. I think we're in a difficult time to really figure out what that is. And that's my bigger worry for you guys, not whether you're going to get the first job, but sort of how do you work the middle part. And I hope that most of it, will be worked out by then, but I don't know. So the good news about, if there is a good news about the contraction, is that it's not the first level jobs that are being cut, I don't think. I don't see a lot of 25, 28, 29-year-olds being cut. I see those jobs as still being there. So for you, right now, that's actually good news, because when papers expand, when they hire young reporters by and large. They're not going to hire, a big salary of someone who's got 20 years experience. So surprisingly, some of these big papers who didn't used to, there was no way you could get in at your age, are now hiring people your age. I'll give you one example. The LA Times has a program called METPRO. Have any of you heard of this? It's the Minority Education and Training Program. Okay, the ET kind of needs to go away. There really isn't any training or education anymore. It's a hiring program. So on the one hand, it's a wonderful opportunity for young reporters to work at the LA Times, to get clips, and to potentially stay on staff, which was really almost not an option before. So that's kind of interesting and great. Now, again, can you then join the fold? Will you be able to rise with the organization? Will you be able to go from there? Or are they just clips you take somewhere else? I don't know. But it creates an avenue and an opportunity for you that didn't, exist 5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Used to be, to get at the LA Times, you'd have to have proven yourself and a track record at smaller and mid-sized papers around the country, and then you'd get a farm league job at one of the bureaus in Valley and Orange County, and you'd have to prove yourself yet again over a series of years before you got downtown. That was the track. Those bureaus don't exist. So there is more ability to sort of get in. This idea that the LA Times would hire young, unproven reporters is new, and it's not just the LA Times. I've seen similar things at other places through what I've heard through friends. So what do you do about the middle of the career if it's unclear? And I have one piece of advice for you for that, which is to specialize. This used to not be so important when I was coming up. In fact, it was kind of weird, that you'd want to cover the same thing forever. I covered police, I covered neighborhoods, I covered courts, I covered county government. I was a general assignment investigative reporter. I did a lot of very different things until and I wanted to, because I wanted to have that sense of knowing. I wanted to know all the different parts of government and communities and know where you get information, be able to kind of own that. I don't know that the jack of all trade thing works today. I see people be very successful when they're very specialized. And that may seem awkward now, because what kind of specialty do you have? But I know that some of you are grad students, and maybe you had another career before this. If you were, a nurse, sell yourself as an expert in healthcare. If you worked at a bank, sell yourself as knowledgeable in finance, and give yourself the opportunity to tell employers what you know that's more specialized and better than any other writer, right? There's a lot of writers out there. What do you have that's different? And please interject, ask questions. Any questions? So I think you should try to become an expert. I'm going to say one thing about pay, and that is that you can expect to make around $30,000 a year, plus or minus. And that's about the same as the average hairdresser, and it's less perhaps than some mechanics starting out. So that's a starting salary, but that's what you can probably expect to make in your first jobs. Yeah. It's never been great in this industry, and the sort of the comfortable wages that have come with the upper echelons, I don't know what to say about those. Okay, so how to get a reporting job? Where are they? Right? I talked about some of this earlier. That you should kind of have a broad view of what kind of job you're going to get. You all know about J-Jobs, I'm sure. You all know about Media Bistro. Go on the job boards and apply for anything that seems even marginally interesting to you. Just the process of applying and getting in front of hiring managers will create contacts for you. Even if that is not the right job for you, there's someone who I didn't hire, who I just don't think is there yet, but I know her now, and she may be there next year. And so I have her in mind, and I know who she is. And if she's smart and sends me clips every now and then to keep her on my radar, it might be a lot easier for both of us the next time we have an opening, right? The other thing is that your contacts are kind of in this room too. They're your professors, they're your advisors, they're your fellow students who are hearing about jobs which they may or may not be interested in, or where people are hiring, right? They're your parents, they're your friends, they're your brother's friends, right? They're, your parents' friends. Once you've identified sort of where you want to work, it's really interesting as you start talking to people. You're going to find someone who knows someone there, and who can give you some insight or make a contact for you that you can get in. I was recruited for every job I ever got. I didn't apply for a want ad. There was always someone who passed my name along, someone who was looking for someone, and I came up. That's how it's always happened for me. I don't think it's quite that easy these days, but still, if I'm looking for someone, I'm going to ask my friends. And if they send me a resume, if they tell me to talk to somebody, I'm going to take that person seriously, maybe in a different way than I would have if they just, come over the transom. So I would say sort of work your contacts. The other thing is you need to look outside Los Angeles. And I know nobody wants to hear that, but you really do. This is a nomadic profession, right? People go from small town to small town until they get to the big towns. TV does this, radio does this routinely, and more in print. We kind of have to do that too. You can either pick where you live, right? Or you can pick what you do. You rarely get the opportunity to do both. I'm not from Los Angeles. I'm from Florida, and I would have probably stayed there if I had my druthers and be near my family, but I didn't. I came here, and I'm glad I did, and I had a wonderful career, and it's been great. But if all I cared about was living in Miami, I would have never come here. So I had this I'm telling you because I had this conversation with students a lot, and I know it's great here and all that. You'll come back, but don't limit yourself right now to being in LA. Okay, I have some more details, but I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts about what I'm saying and what you think about it, and what questions you might have, and challenge me. Come on, you're USC students. Go ahead.
Well, I think for me personally, I want to get into the entertainment industry, and I don't know where else in the world I would be other than LA to do that.
Well, that's fair. Yeah.
I mean, I really want to do it for that reason, but at the same time, I think that I may be limiting myself in the sheer sense that I'm saying, I just want to do entertainment and fashion.
Right. Entertainment and fashion are kind of two different things.
Well, yeah, totally too. So fashion and always have to go to New York. So.
Yeah, fashion would more be right, obviously New York. But so, what do you want to do in entertainment?
I like to cover like red carpet events, as well as like possibly work in like longer form stuff, like TV, the Style Channel shows, and that type of programming, even as far as Food Network. But I kind of more of the softer stuff, even like working in talk shows and stuff. I love talk shows. I know that's not quite journalism, but at the same time, it's a facet of it.
It's asking questions, but let me ask you, how do you see that career path going, right? So what do you see as the entry point for that career path?
I think the entry point is starting and getting an internship with one of those big talk show people.
Yeah.
And kind of working your way up through that. And I think the most important thing is probably landing a really good internship where you can make the connections and get known within a production company. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not my world, but I would just have to, just being a critical thinker, I would just have to assume that anything that's that glamorous, right, is going to be a bear.
It's going to be,
Yeah. And that you might want to consider trying to find a feature writing job and, and write some more lifestyle stories. I mean, so... those kinds of things are covered by newspapers, and they're covered by Variety, and they're covered by all that whole Hollywood trade, and that might be an easier entry point.
Entry point to start as opposed to getting engaged.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying don't apply for it, but I'm saying have a plan B and
that
C.
way you can get your name known in the industry too.
Yeah. It's another group. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a student, but
I
is it
know.
okay if I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you get a lot of turnover? Once you hire people, do they tend to stay at your publication for a long time, or do they move on?
We have a lot of turnover.
Where do they go?
They go everywhere. So.
But they stay in journalism for the most part?
Some do, some don't. Some go into PR. They just decide, you know what, forget it. This is too hard, and they don't pay me enough. And here's especially with ours. I mean, so these law firms come around, right? And that's a different paycheck. So 1.5, 2 years, generally. Some longer, but that's not unusual for someone to be on set for 1.5 to 2 years, and then to move on to. I'm trying to think. One of our reporters, Catherine Ho, just went off to work at the Washington Post they have I'm forgetting the name, Capital something. They have this new subscription publication for DC that they've started, and so she's reporting for them, and her stuff goes in the broadsheet too. One of Sarah Libby went to Politico.
She was one of the Annenberg student.
She was an editor for us. She did our columns.
You said she was Lewis.
I think so.
Oh, yeah.
Sarah Libby,
Yeah. So and then we just had someone go to a housing specialized news site. So still in trades, a different trade. We've had so it's really varied, and that's why I'm saying I don't know what the middle looks like. because it's not as direct as it used to be. And the other thing is that a lot of these people, and obviously not those two, but a lot of people want to stay in LA. And I tell them not to, and no one listens to me. But I think that's a mistake. I think it's a difficult time. I think there's been way too many layoffs in Los Angeles. There's way too many out-of-work journalists. I think it's hard. A lot of them have gone to, a lot of my former colleagues at the Times are now with Patch.
Do they ever go to any of your other bureaus? I mean, you have bureaus all around the country.
Yeah. I mean, so people have gone from LA to DC. People have gone up to San Francisco. But I still consider that, in-house. Another reporter just went off to American Lawyer, which is, based in New York. And that actually happens quite frequently. We've had other reporters go to the Business Journal in LA, who just want to stay in LA. I still think there's a lot of hopscotching that we do as journalists that we have to do. You get somewhere, you do what you can do, and if another beat doesn't open up, some of them will go from beat to beat, until they kind of get the experience they want. And then I think you still have to move on. I don't think it's it's not a one-stop shop. It's not like becoming a cop with the LAPD and you're kind of done. I think there's still a lot of hopscotching that needs to happen in order to propel your career forward.
Where do you see web development jobs going?
Web development jobs? I don't have the slightest idea. You talk about developing the websites themselves?
Yeah, are they also working in a journalistic capacity?
Yeah, no, they're not journalists. So that line is still pretty much there. Our web people are on a different floor, and they're just developing the web. Now first of all, we're completely behind a paywall, so you can't even get it on our site and see anything but ads unless you pay $800 a year. So that's a very unusual model. But our web people are on a different floor. We load the web. We do all of that. We figure out where the stories go on the page, and we do that. But we don't develop the sites, and journalists aren't developing the sites anywhere that I know, really. Journalists are pushing into some of the, and this is not too far off, but some of the data scrubbing and some of the creating of tools to handle data and to come up with stories. I have seen some of that among my colleagues and peers. I'm thinking of one person in particular, so no longer really writing, but more sort of using the tools and creating new tools to gather information, to kind of push stories out. But the developing of the sort of the page itself and its design and its look, I don't see that being done by journalists, but that's my experience.
What about people coming from other countries, from China? I wonder how can I engage in the journalism here?
Yeah. Well, so I think you use it, right? So anything that makes you unusual or different, I think is not a drawback. I think it's an opportunity. So, for instance, I would say that business coverage in the West, in China, I think that's a strong selling point for you. You're from there, you know the area. We just hired someone to cover clean tech, and as I'm sure China is leaps and bounds ahead of the U.S. in terms of developing solar in particular, and it's probably it's said to be part of the reason why Solyndra went under. So there's definitely, if you can use it, I would use it to my advantage. I would apply for jobs that have the kind of where that is a plus. That's what I would do. Yeah. Go ahead.
You talked about specialization. If we're have a starting job at a small paper or broadcast where we're doing general assignment work.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for us to sort of start building our specialization?
Yeah, so I think that it depends on how busy it is, but no matter how busy it is, you can always find time to find the stories that interest you, right? And to start building a book of, a body of work on that. So there's always going to be downtime, there's always going to be time to push. The most important thing is to start making sources in an area. If you don't have it coming in, if you don't have the real life experience coming in that you can leverage, I think that you just need to start drilling down on what it is that you want and start developing the sources so they start telling you the story so you can pitch them. That's all about in that situation, it's all about pitching the stories and continuing to pitch them. And the editors will start to pay attention to what you're interested in because, editors want to make reporters happy too. And we'll start steering some of those stories your way as well. And they will help develop you. But you have to decide. You have to decide what it is. Yeah. All right.
I'm going to jump in with one comment because I think that I'm going to be able to kind of put your remarks into a context that would be perhaps interesting to you as well as to our students. I'm finding it particularly helpful to have Evelyn here talking about something we don't talk about as much as we really ought to, which is these traditional legacy news organizations are indeed going on. Their death has been greatly overstated.
Right.
And these are important things for us to think about, both in terms of those jobs and also in terms of developing the fundamentals. I do think that some of the students are coming from a place that we are very much encouraging, which is to think about the set of skills that you learn here. Obviously, writing, interviewing, critical thinking, how to do good research, supplying information in the public interest, and using those in a bunch of different and untraditional ways. So some of our graduates who have had opportunities, as you know, that are available now to young people to go into more traditional jobs have chosen instead to go to Talking Points Memo or Global Post.
Sure.
And some of them are going to be using their web development skills in those jobs, having been trained as journalists, because those are more web-oriented jobs, or because they don't have as big a staff, so they don't get to have separate, web developers, etc. So it's an interesting question. I think you're exactly right to advise this young woman that, even if your dream job is a certain kind of, and you felt the same way, I know, that thinking of a sort of a B, but I also might be like go and write entertainment stories for a newspaper, sort of. So it is, it's an interesting moment of change. We're really encouraging people to think entrepreneurially because we know that same old, I step into this job and I just rise in this, as you said, it's one organization. Although a lot of us in the past went from, newspaper to newspaper, sort of nomadically, as you said. We're teaching people to think entrepreneurially. We're a lot of our students expect the same way artists expect, I think, to kind of go out and put a lot of things together, but follow their dreams somehow.
Yeah.
Do a startup. I mean, the kind of thing you thought about in your Stanford years. So just to kind of throw that out, I think it is really useful to remember that these skills, which we're teaching, basic reporting and writing skills, are absolutely essential to so many jobs, and that these jobs continue to be available.
No, and that's what I just wanted to point it out, because in my experience at Stanford, there was all this pushing into this brave new world, and I think it's great. I really do. And I learned Final Cut, and I did all that stuff, and it was really fun, and I really enjoyed it. But, at the end of the day, I came back to my job in a traditional trade publication, So I just want to let people know that these jobs really do still exist. You don't have to go the other way, and that in some cases it may be the easier way to get in to begin with, and then you can go off and do whatever you want after that. But there's a really invaluable experience that comes from just slugging through those stories day in and day out, and writing and writing and writing and writing, and writing some more, even when you're tired, and keeping on doing it. You're never going to learn to write in theory. You have to learn to write in practice. And so I think these jobs are really good in terms of, getting those skills, even if you do decide to, do your startup or whatever down the road.
You talked about a candidate sending you clips. Do you ever look at online portfolios? And if so, what do you do?
I'm glad you asked that, because I actually have some very boring and practical advice for you. I've read a lot of resumes. So in a nutshell, here's what I'm looking for, and I think it's probably the same as what a lot of people are looking for. I want to know what's special about you, what you can do, and how you learned it, and that's it. I get a lot of resumes that go on for 2 pages, and I'm sorry, but when you're 25, you cannot have a 2-page resume. Seriously, boil it down. do not list every single thing, every task you were asked to do at a job. I won't read it. It will drive me crazy. I will think you can't self-edit, and I will toss it aside unless maybe someone says, really, she's really, really good. Fine. But you know, you need to edit. It needs to be, that's what I want to get. I'm going to look at it really quickly, and I'm going to want to know, where did you work, and what did you learn while you were there? So don't give me a list of, HTML and, Final Cut Pro and blah, blah, blah. You might want to put that at the end somewhere with, programs you want. But in the body of what your experience is, I want to know, wrote 300-word feature stories, or investigated, built a database on, school scores, or, really nuts and bolts skills that are journalism skills that you learned in these jobs and that you bring with you to me and that I can count on. So, so one page, what's special about you, where you learned it. Modify your resume for each position that you apply for. That will make keeping it simple easier, because the website's going to think it's great that you can code, right? But the very boring gray publication that I work for doesn't care and isn't going to pay attention to that, and it's just going to bulk it up. So I know that's a lot of work, but I would suggest that you edit it for every job that you apply. Cover letter, same thing. What makes you particularly suited for this particular job at this particular time, right? Is it a job about, clean tech? Well, I'm from China, and, I speak Mandarin or whatever, and, these are the connections that I've made, and this is what I can bring to the job, right? Why is this job good for you right now? Not in general, in specifics. You also want to give a sense of what you're like in that cover letter. Are you driven? Are you thoughtful? Are you creative? Who are you? Let me know who you are from the get-go. From the minute I see your materials, I want to have a sense of who you are. If you're funny, it's okay to be funny in the letter. If you're serious, don't be funny in the letter. It's not going to work for you, and and then I'm going to meet you, and it's going to be like, wow, you're really stiff. That's not what I expected. So be yourself. Same thing goes for the interview, be yourself. It's like dating, right? So you're going to come in, and I'm sizing you up, and you're sizing me up. And I don't think that the reporters coming into jobs do enough sizing up of me, and they should be sizing me up. They should be finding out, what is this organization about, and what does this organization value, and who else is in the room, and what are they like? Right? And so, is this a good fit? I think you should be asking yourself the question too, is this a good fit for me? Or can it be a good fit? Because otherwise you come in and it doesn't quite work, and we've had those situations too, and nobody likes that. The whole purpose for the interview process and all of this is to make sure that it's a good fit. And it's as important on your side as it is on our side. Go ahead.
How do you feel about people, like students maybe, or people who are looking to get a job, and they have their own website where they have like their resume and projects they're working on, or their samples of their writing? How do you feel about getting something like that in an application?
I think it's great. The only downside I would find to that is goes back to my self-editing comment. So what's on there, and how much is on there? And is it going to be a lot to wade through? Am I going to give up without getting to, the 2 or 3 stories you really want me to see, right? You're going to want me to see 2 or 3 stories that you think are really great and that fit in with this job. And you need to put those ahead in front of me first, because I'm wading through 45 applications, right? So that's the only downside, and it goes back to your question. There's nothing wrong with having, a page of your work, and that's great. And especially if it's all in one theme and it all works, but at the beginning I feel like it's not going to be that, at least it wasn't for me, that it's going to be a lot of different kinds of things. And my concern is that it would be a lot to wade through, and it may not help you in the end. And I know it's a lot less work because you just kind of do it once, but that would be my caution there, is the sort of the difficulty in wading through that. back to the application process. If you are up for a particular beat, you want to come in with some story ideas to the job interview. If you come in with some story ideas, I know that you've been thinking about it, and I know how you think. Are you a feature writer? Are you an investigative reporter? Are you a news junkie? Depending on what stories you bring to me, I'm going to know who you are in a fuller way than I wouldn't know just from talking generally about the coverage. And that's going to help me decide, is this the kind of person that I need for this job? Yes?
Can you just clarify that? So the person should be reading your product carefully before they arrive for the interview and have in mind story pitches that they can offer you.
Absolutely, if they can. Now, in the case of my publication, since we're behind a paywall, you probably can't read it. Well, you can go to the legal library and read it. But even if it is something like that, if you're applying for, say, a job in real estate, phone up, read what's been going on in the real estate industry right now, and figure out what stories are interesting to you. What would you want to read? What have you not read about that? And come in with 3 or 4 of those ideas. Because it'll help me decide whether, again, is this a good fit, Or because if they're not the kinds of stories that I want, then I'm going to be assigning you stuff, and you're not going to be happy, and I'm not going to be happy, and it's really good to kind of have these conversations up front. That doesn't apply for a more general assignment job, but if it is for a beat, I would highly recommend that you come in with story ideas. How are we doing? All right, so how to get the job right, what it looks like. What do you do when you get there? This is going to be kind of a short part, but I have a lot to say about this. You start working before you get there. You know what the voice of your publication is. You know what the writing style is. You know what's important to this publication and this audience. And you kind of have to know who the bigger, if it's a general beat, who the people are in the community who you should know, and if it's a specialized beat, who the people are in that particular beat that you want to know. If you start trying to learn that your first few days, you're not going to be very productive, and people are going to wonder what you're doing. So you want to come in ready for work the first day. Personally, arrive early, leave late, and volunteer for the crappy assignments. And when you volunteer for that really, really bad assignment, do the best possible job that you can. Don't just phone it in, shine. Absolutely put yourself heart and soul into this job, and that I think is what most of the success comes from in journalism. I think that's how you get the second and the third job. What stories to write? Personally, there's a couple of things that I do, and one of them is I look at my beat. I use the prism of my beat to look at the world. So, if I'm covering a beat, I want to know, how does rampant unemployment affect that area? If I'm covering the courts, are there more bankruptcies? What do they look like? Are the people working in the court themselves struggling financially, and how's that affecting them? Take what's going on today and apply it to the thing that you're looking at, and you're going to find some really relevant stories. The other thing that I do when I start a beat is I talk to the biggest players I can get, and I ask them what works, what doesn't work, and why. On or off the record, I just want to know. And what's the biggest story, what's going to be the biggest story on this beat in the next 12 months, in the next 6 months, in the next month? And I start to build a story list from that, and I start to see patterns. And at the end of that, you know what the fundamental issue is on your beat. And every beat, I feel, at a particular time has no more than 2 or 3 fundamental issues that people are struggling with and dealing with at that time. And if you can zone in on what those are, then you can start to pick away at those stories, and you have a body of work that says something much larger than this just one-off, chasing after the next fire engine. You've focused yourself on what's important, and you're asking the smart questions every single time in every single story. Okay, 3 things not to do. You ready? Do not use your editor to decompress after interviews. Make your own decisions about what's important and what's not important, and pitch me a story. If I have to tell you whether it's a story or not, and how long it should be, and whether it's a front page or not, you're not doing the critical part of your job, which is critical thinking, right? And I edit 6 people, and I don't have the time to to do that for everyone every day. The reporters I love are the reporters who know their beat, and they come in and they tell me, this is going on, and I think it's a good story. And I can argue with them, and I can say yes or no. And I can say, well, what about this other thing? And we have these discussions, but they come in with opinions. They don't just come in after an interview and kind of decompress in my office. I've had people do that. It's maddening. And according to some people I work with, we're seeing more of that. So don't do that. This one goes without saying, but dress professionally, please.
No, you have to say it.
Yeah, I mean, that face hair might be really ironic and cool, like, an eagle walk on a Saturday night, but when you're representing an organization and you're representing that organization in front of really important people, don't give them an excuse to write you off immediately. They're already like, how old are you? So don't give them an excuse. Dress professionally, look professionally. This is a professional job. Lastly, if you Facebook colleagues and editors, don't, on a Friday afternoon, say, OMG, can't wait for the weekend, when your editor can look out her door and see you sitting at your desk, because she will give you the worst assignment she could possibly take out.
One that will last through the weekend.
Through all weekend. So that's what I've got. More questions, more thoughts?
I
Yeah.
have another question. What made you move to a trade publication? Because I'm a big fan of trade publications, and I think a lot of students never consider them or never even think about them.
I got to say, I would have never, ever, ever considered it, but I was laid off. David Houston, the editor, called me right away and asked me to come over as an editor, and I'd been a reporter forever.
You were laid off from the LA Times.
I was laid off from the LA Times, yeah. And I was like, editor? Who wants to do that? I want bylines. But I love it. I absolutely love it. I love being an editor. I love, despite my snippy little comments, I really do enjoy developing reporters and helping them find stories, and helping them figure out what's, where the heart of something is, and how to get it. It's not so easy to get, it's really rewarding when someone is kind of hitting a roadblock and you show them how to get around it, and they do, and they get the killer story, and that I don't care about not having the byline if I can do that. So I've really, really, really enjoyed it. And as for the trades, what I love about them is that the people in the trades are really smart, and they have to be, because they're on the same level with some really, really high-level people in industries, be it business, be it law, be it real estate, be it whatever. You have to know the ins and outs the same way they do in order to spot the stories and to tell them what they need to do, what they need to know to do their job better. And so it's in many ways much more challenging. And I also think that business reporting, frankly, is the most stable thing to go into right now anyway. Bloomberg's been hiring like crazy. Reuters is on a push right now. The Journal is more financially stable than a lot of other places. The pay is usually a little bit better. If I were starting out today, I would probably start out in business reporting.
Remember that economic literacy?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Question just about your publication. You guys have such a strange model, like really expensive behind the paywall.
Yeah.
Are you guys feeling pressure to change? Are you guys feeling pressure to do anything differently?
The company is extraordinarily financially sound.
So you guys are doing your thing. You feel good about it completely. There's no.
Well, it's the law firms, right? The pay.
This is it's $800 a year. It's sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The Los Angeles Texas Daily Journal. So we're the biggest legal publication in the West, and we give them a lot of value for that $800. A lot of things that they wouldn't have the time to keep up on their own, and that we add a dimension that you're not going to get from the mainstream publications, particularly, frankly, as things shrink. We can give them a level of insight that they're not getting in other places, and we can really zone in on what's important to them. And they're very happy with us. We're very gray, I will say that.
A lot of trade publications. Do you think that's the case with a lot of trade publications?
I do. So when I was at the Miami Herald Spanish edition, El Nuevo Herald. So that when I had that choice, I took that job. And there was a time that I was freelancing for something that they had called Cuba News, and I honestly don't know if it's still around today. But it was a very, very highly targeted trade publication to businesses that were thinking about or doing business with Cuba. And I don't remember what they charged, but I remember at the time it seemed like an astronomical sum to me. And the stories were not difficult, but they were very focused. So I remember doing some on tourism, where I surveyed some international hotel chains about their plans for expansion in Cuba, and I was paid some ridiculously good amount of money for that story, and they were doing really, really well. So trades go on exclusivity and subscription fees.
You know, whenever people talk about paywalls, there are a number of things that keep coming up for those who succeed. One of them is niche content.
Yeah.
Another one is often that's paid for by your employer.
Yeah.
And a third is people really pay for community. I mean, this is a community of interest, the people who are getting this legal news.
Yeah.
Does your publication have internships for students?
We don't do a lot of that. So we believe in actually paying people to work for us, and having it be an actual job. I mean, we'll occasionally have a summer intern. Not necessarily every year, and it's one person. And
Well, if you ever do, let us know.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
How important is legal knowledge to you?
We used to say you had to have a law degree to come in. That's not so important anymore. I feel like we do like a graduate degree. I mean, we do typically shy away from hiring people who are in their very early 20s and haven't had a whole lot of life experience or critical thinking. And that leads me to something else. I mean, we hired someone who had been a reporter, gone off and worked in PR, and came back. We've hired we hired someone who was did a little reporting and then went and the reason I mentioned banking, went off and did some banking for a while, and then came back. We want really smart people who are able to project a certain amount of confidence and can get to the heart of an issue, understand complicated things, and express them. Right? So you don't have to come in with a law degree. We do have people on staff who have law degrees, but that's not necessary. On the reporting side, on the verdicts and settlements and some of the other things, we do require it. But on the reporting and editing side, it's no longer a requirement.
Anybody else?
Sure. You had mentioned earlier about that young woman who you wanted to hire, but she wasn't quite ready yet.
Yeah.
In terms of her sending you clips,
yeah.
How often would you like to be reminded of her?
Right. How often? Yeah. It's a really right. Until we start blocking your emails, right? So I would say it's situational, right? So I would say that, for instance, let's say we were not behind a paywall, right? And let's say we did a really great job. In fact, I'll tell you something. So one of our reporters who covers federal courts wrote the story about a federal judge here in Los Angeles who was sitting on recommendations by lower judges called magistrate judges that some prisoners ought to be freed, right? Prisoners in jail ought to be freed. He was sitting on them for years, and one guy died waiting. And he broke that story. And we pushed it out. I teased, I sent it out to AP, and so we pushed it out, and it got on LA Observed, and the LA Times followed it, and it was kind of a big deal. If you're someone who had been talking to us about a job, you might send me an email and say, hey, I saw that story, that was great, that's really awesome, by the way, here's 2 or 3 things I've been working on lately, and attach those. I might do that. Just to, or if you had something that you did that you're really proud of that just came out, send it along, say, hey, I know you're busy, you probably don't have anything right now, but I just wanted to kind of keep on your radar, and that's going to be every few months, right? I mean, that's not going to happen every week. So right?
Right.
I hope. So I would just keep sort of periodic checks is what I would do, and just kind of touch the base every now and then and see what's up. And some people will hate that, and you'll get it right away, and they won't respond, and they'll be really rude, and that won't work for them. It would work for me. you kind of got to know who you're dealing with, too.
And I've heard other people acknowledge that somebody just bugged the hell out of them and they finally hired him because
Just
of that.
shut them up,
Right?
yeah.
But really, because they were always there in their face.
Right, yeah.
It really is simple.
It really is, yeah, yeah. But I mean, if there's one thing I would stress to you, if there's a takeaway from this, first of all, it's, we're all looking forward and we're all looking to the new and the hot and the whatever, and there's definitely a lot there, but don't write off the traditional, because the traditional is still here, and it's, there's a lot of it that's actually still doing really, really well financially and is pretty stable and can give you the tools, and the experience that you need to move on. You don't have to set it forever, but, the other thing is work your contacts and build on those contacts, Get job interviews, meet people. That's how you find jobs most of the time. And don't Facebook your editor. Yeah, right.
The other thing that I would add to all that, you would not believe how often, when people are, as Evelyn correctly advises, changing their cover letters, you wouldn't believe how often people send the one to the wrong paper and then go on and on about my dream job is with your newspaper,
Right.
And you're not the.
Right.
Your biggest competitor is the.
Yeah.
And it's just idiotic because you look like a total fool.
Yeah.
You've gone in great, detail about why this paper is your soulmate newspaper.
Yeah.
You listed the wrong damn newspaper.
Fatal.
People
Yeah.
do that, they apply to a Neiman and talk about why the Knight Fellowship's at Stanford.
Right.
And say, the Neiman has always been my dream. Forget it.
Then go there.
It's pretty well a fatal error. It's just really stupid.
Yeah.
Spend more time with that.
No doubt, yeah. Proofreading, key. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
please join me in thanking Evelyn. This is on YouTube, and your crowd down the road will be much richer. It'll be a long tail. You've given us so much.
All right.
Back rich.
Hi, the long email response. Question.
Sorry.